Okay, well, I wanted to introduce myself. My background is physical therapist, and I got my master's in human biology, and so I was able to teach anatomy, physiology. I actually still am a adjunct professor for Adventist University, which is out of Florida, and we have a satellite program, and just started a nursing program there in Denver through the Florida hospital. And so a lot of the classes are taught on video, but the labs you can't do that way, so I teach the labs there live. I worked for 7 years at 2 different lifestyle centers, Weimar Institute and Heartland Institute. And then I ended up deciding to go back home where I grew up in Paradise, California. And after doing home health physical therapy for a while, I talked the CEO into starting a lifestyle medicine department at the hospital, which is rare, and I think we developed one of the better programs that are out there in a hospital setting. I figured that was going to be my last hurrah. That would be the thing I would continue to work on till I died or retired or something like that. And then we had a tragedy occur in our family. My daughter and her whole family, two grandkids and her husband, were killed in a plane crash 4 years ago. We're actually going March 22 it was, and we go every year back to Butte, Montana. Those of you who are in this area may have remembered the small plane crash with 3 families. All of them had graduated from Loma Linda. They had nurses and physicians and dentists, and so that kind of changed our whole picture. One of the things we decided at that time was our son was up here in Denver, and we just realized we needed to be near him, especially when he promised that they would have a grandchild for us if we moved here. Or when we found out he was pregnant, we ended up getting here 2 weeks before the baby was born. But I also realized that we wanted to see them as soon as possible. So we wanted the Lord to come. And as I looked at different options that were out there, and with my background as well, I realized that if we could strengthen our health ministry program in this conference, that that would be the most powerful and I believe speed his coming. And so I went to the conference and said, because they didn't have money to hire a health ministries director, and I said, we need one, and I will volunteer to do that here. We started that almost a year ago. I think it was February last year. And I really believe that, like I said, the health ministry is the greatest opportunity to reveal Christ's character. And that's what we want to talk about during this session. Let me introduce this by saying, when we think about hastening Christ's coming, what's one of the first texts we think about that tells us what has to happen before he comes? There you go. Matthew 24:14. So the gospel has to be preached in all the world, and then he'll come. Well, that was interesting. As I thought about that, I thought, well, pastors better get busy then, because it talks about preaching the gospel, and that's what they do. And then recently I read a quotation that you may have all seen, and that is, when Christ's character is perfectly reproduced in his people, then he will come to claim his own. I thought, well, wait. When this happens, he will come. Is there a disconnect between those two quotations? See, the gospel being proclaimed really is revealing his character. When I started using that quotation about his character perfectly reproduced in his people, I didn't realize that it was a negative thing to many people. When his character is perfectly reproduced, then we can be saved. It's the way they were seeing that. But I was seeing it totally different, and that was when his character is reproduced, and it is shared or spilled on people, so to speak, as we bump into them, and they see what God is like, then he'll come. And it started to make a lot of sense, because what the world needs today is what it needed 2,000 years ago. A revelation of Christ. And then I saw that God sent his Son to reveal who he is about in person. He could have sent information, couldn't he? He could have had this multimedia presentation in the sky that would blow the socks off of any one of our net meetings that we do for evangelism. He could have done that and gave all this information, says, now you guys know the truth. Now follow it, and it'll be over. But he didn't do that. He sent a person. And I realized, wow, if it's the same thing today as it was 2,000 years ago, then he doesn't want just information again. He wants people. So he sends us to do the very work that was critical to happen 2,000 years ago. And that is to reveal his character. Because the great controversy has been about who God is. And as I looked at this also, I realized that God does not surprise people. For him to come and say, okay, folks, we're dividing the sheep and the goats. These people are going to heaven. These people, oh, sorry, it's like flames and heat and fire on you guys. There's nobody that's going to say, wait, who are you? And what was this choice? He does not surprise people, and everyone must know who he is to decide, do I want to live with him forever? See, when you're dating and you're even thinking about just living with someone for the rest of your life, you better know who they are. Well, this is living with someone forever, for eternity. I don't want to make a mistake on that. And so God says, I want you to know what you're getting into. I want you to know about my government that you will be kind of under. I want you to know who I am, and then decide, do you want that? So I realized that that was the main purpose that we as Christians have to do. You know, it started back, these character reflectors. You know, Abraham, Noah. All of these were reflectors of who God was. And then Jesus came and reflected perfectly who he was. And then we have other people, there's Daniel and those, and then there's us. And what's our job? Reflect his character. The more perfectly we can reflect it, the better our job will be. And it's almost simplified my work to say, what do we do all this for? It's very simple. Reflect his character. So let's talk about how we reflect his character. When I was learning coaching, these principles actually were taught in a coaching program that had no spiritual connection at all. Now, they didn't tie them in exactly like I'm going to do, but I realized that the devil steals God's good plans and we can take them back. And so when we talk about coaching, these principles are exciting as we look about how God uses them. So the 4 principles we're going to look at is insight, listening, powerful questions, and support. But before I cover them, I want you to realize that if I am going to reflect his character, a reflection is there is something out there that bounces off of me onto somebody else, isn't it? So if God does something and he has a characteristic and he uses that for me and he gives that to me, and then I reflect and do the same thing to somebody else, isn't that one of the most perfect ways of reflecting his character? So coaching provides an opportunity for me not just to use good skills to help a person achieve a goal, but it uses the skills that actually reflect what God does to us. And that is exciting, because I might tell somebody, we need to reflect Christ's character. and they don't really have the skills, and they don't really look at this specifically, and so they just say, well, just be a nice person. When I talk to people, I'll try to talk to them like Jesus would or something. But there are characteristics that he uses that we can learn as skills to reflect him. And so I want to start with that on insight. This is a characteristic of God because, think about it, without God, I can be scared, I can be hopeless, I can have no point in life, and then I get some insight on what is available, and all of a sudden, things change. So insight is a process of viewing something from a different vantage point. And then also viewing things from their relative importance. So if I focus on something that is not really very important, and I eliminate things that are more important, you see, I can get messed up. If I see things from a different vantage point, it can really help a person too. And I'll give you a story in the Bible. Remember about Elisha? They were surrounded by the Syrians. You remember that his servant was scared to death. You can imagine, because the Syrians were the most ruthless neighbors that they had around them. And his servant not only felt that he was going to die, but he was going to probably be tortured to death. And so he is trembling. Elisha has different insight, doesn't he? Elisha is not scared at all. In fact, when Elisha prayed that his servant's eyes would be open, that's insight, and he saw that God's army was bigger and stronger and more powerful than all the Syrians around them, and they surrounded that army, there was new insight, wasn't there? What if you, as a coach, are able to give insight to someone and relieve those kind of stresses, relieve those kind of fears, give hope and remove distress and depression and those type of things because of insight. So think about the thing that has changed your view of the world because of what God has given to us, such as Bible promises. Those are truth. And we'll talk about Bible promises later. So when we give insight, we are revealing a characteristic of God who relieves stress, relieves pressure from us when we simply know the truth about how he lives. Because most of the stresses that we have are because we believe a lie. I want to share just a little bit about Bible promises, which is an aspect of insight. Bible promises are an interesting thing because I used to think of them as, and I'll just have to be honest with you, if I was to take a particular promise, so I have the text, I know where it's found, and when I need this particular promise, I will plug it in. If I have a particular need and I find the right promise to go in there, then God has to do that for me. I'm being a little facetious, but in a way that was on my mind, that was kind of what was happening. If I claim the promise, then it has to happen. So there was something that had, kind of a little trick that had to make this work. And then I think I was reading through the text that talks about the great and precious promises, that by them we escape the corruption that's in the world and so forth. And it dawned on me that promises were simply statements of truth. Now, truth doesn't have to be claimed necessarily. Truth is always there. And so I put together a little story that helped me understand this. My son, I saw him through the door stealing cookies out of the cookie jar. And later, I get my two kids together and say, hey, the cookies are all gone. We were going to have those for dessert. Who ate those? And they both said, I didn't. Now, if I had not seen him, I would be fooled maybe by his lie. Is that true? He could probably fool me by his lie. But I saw him. So when he lied to me, how much power was there to his lie? Zero. I wasn't fooled at all because I saw him. Now think about how that applies to promises. A temptation is a lie that's believable. So when I'm tempted, I am really being told a lie. But it's a very tricky lie that I might believe. What if I know what the truth is? What happened to a lie when I know the truth? Lose the power. This was incredible. In fact, I had a fellow call me when I was back in Virginia at a health center. His friend told him that he needed to call me. He had a drug problem. I think it was cocaine. His friend told him to call me. So I got his call, and he said, well, my friend's there at the program. He thinks this would be helpful for me, but I can't come. And he wanted help. He was addicted, and he couldn't get off of this. And we talked for a while. And I said, I hope you don't mind, because he didn't call as a Christian, and I hope you don't mind, but the answer I'm going to give you is kind of a spiritual one. Is that okay? Are you okay with that? He said, oh yeah, that's okay. I shared with him this aspect of promises that tell me truth, so that we will not believe a lie. And I said, here are the lies that you are believing, and here's the truth. Wow, that's something. So as we saw the lie, we also saw what the truth was, and so the lie, what happens when you know the truth? Lost its power. Wow, who would like to lose the power that I was struggling under by just knowing truth? It was powerful to see that. In fact, this fellow, I couldn't believe this. I gave him 5 or 6 texts, and I said, I don't have time to give you the whole thing, but look them up. Do you have a Bible anywhere? He says, I might be able to find one somewhere. So, and then I sent him the rest of my whole page that you have in your handouts. He had victory over this cocaine habit from simply me giving him 5 or 6 Bible texts that were truth. And I know this is true because I talked to people who knew him afterwards and over a long period of time. I could not believe this. In fact, his mother called, not knowing what had happened, but knew that he had called our health center, and she says, you know, I know you wanted to get my son to come to this health program, but he needs professional help. He needs to go to a center who can put him on this different medication where they have physicians and so forth, and he went through all of this stuff. This was after I found out he had been successful with this. And here, she was telling me how he had to be on this professional program, and 5 Bible verses cured him. And I couldn't believe that myself, how powerful that is, until I realized that promises are simply truth, and when you know truth, temptations lose their power. These are things we can help people with insight. Did that make sense? Giving insight is a gift that God gives to us, and we simply pass that on to Him. God wants us to be restored. As we look at that, for I know the plans that I have for you. See those plans? The goal? To prosper you and not to harm, to give you hope in the future. When we have those same desires for people. So God does work in our lives, doesn't He? And we know that in all things God works for the good for those who love Him. That's a principle of insight that we share with people, and when they see that, it relieves the suffering and the distress. Listening is probably one of the most important and most missed things that God gives to us. The listening skill, say even in Americans that are far more socially isolated today, even with our social networking and all that type of thing, But what's neat about this is it might be a setup. What if they weren't socially isolated? What if people had good connection already? What could we provide for them? If a person's hungry and you give them food, they are really excited to get it. But you can't excite people about food when they're already full. So today we have a world that is socially disconnected and is hungry for someone to listen to them. And we can provide that. And now God's character can be seen in a desert of listening. This aspect that Jesus said gives us a good insight on that. And that is, Jesus raised his eyes to heaven and he prayed, Father, I'm grateful that you have listened to me. You always listen to me. Now here is the Father giving a characteristic of his to his Son, who had to learn all over. And that was of listening. So what does Jesus do in return? He listens to the disciples. He listens to the people he runs into. He listens to us. And what do we do in return? We reflect also. So we start listening. And each of those passing down this characteristic of God is reflection. It's reflected from God to Jesus to us to others. That is true reflecting. So as I sit and listen to someone and ask questions and care about what they have to say, I am reflecting one of the most important characteristics of God that maybe people haven't seen for a long time. So listening, we're going to spend a little time on listening because there's a skill, not just to know that you should do it. When I listen to someone, it really shows acceptance to them. I accept you. I want to know more about you. If I'm always talking, I really am not accepting you. You just happen to be someone I can talk to instead of listen to. The person that is speaking and I'm listening to then feels understood and validated. I must be important if they care about what I have to say. You see, if I'm talking and all of you leave, how validated do I feel that I had something to give? So being listened to is really helpful. And so I really feel validated here. You guys are hanging in there and listening and not leaving. It also helps others believe in themselves. There must be something important in my life that this person is willing to listen to me. We should understand some of the challenges to listening. Obviously, if we don't listen very well, there must be some obstacles that get in the way of that. So one of those would be environmental distractions. Or let's say I'm talking to someone across the table, and I've got my cell phone out there, and little messages keep coming up. Have you ever sat by someone where you're talking to them, and they keep glancing over at their cell phone, especially when you hear it rattle and stuff, and they're checking those out? Don't you feel distracted? Don't you feel like that person cares more about that? So we get distracted by our environment. If it's really hot, if I'm calling someone on the phone and the TV's on and my kids are making a bunch of noise and stuff, I'm going to be distracted from listening. So if I'm using coaching over the phone, I'm going to find a quiet place where it's comfortable. I'm not going to be distracted. My phone is somewhere else. And I am not thinking about other stuff. So I can listen to them. So environmental distraction. Multitasking. Now that kind of brings up that phone again. But let's say I'm doing coaching and I'm washing dishes or something because I've got a little earpiece and I can talk to them on that. And they're actually hearing this. Oh, well, I'm just making sure I can get a lot of other things done. Again, how important do they feel? You're multitasking. You can't think. Or I'm driving in the car and I've got my Bluetooth and I'm doing my coaching then because I don't have a lot of time. I'm definitely going to be distracted there. Our natural tendency to problem solve. Probably the biggest place where this occurs is you go to see the doctor. I think the research has indicated that a doctor will determine what the problem is in less than 3 minutes that he is in the room with you, in the exam room, and will have already figured out a solution. In other words, he has problem solved, he has figured it out. Is he going to listen to you if he has to do that type of thing? If he has to solve the problem, generally, he or she, I should have said, what will happen is they're examining, they're getting this information as fast as they can, they're trying to come up with a solution. They are not listening very well. And many of you have been in those office settings where you said something to the doctor and they just went in one ear and out the other, because he's got to solve the problem. And so we can do the same thing. We end up with the same attitude where a person starts talking and we got a solution to the problem. Oh, what about this? We're problem solving. And that sounds like a good thing to do, but it's important for us to stop and listen and say, wait, I don't know if I heard the whole story yet. Why am I solving a problem before I've heard the whole story? And so listening gets distracted by our problem solving. Guys have a tendency to do that. You know, their wife comes up and says, honey, this is this is what's happening. And he says, oh, okay, here's how you fix it. You know, and she says, I just wanted you to listen to me. I didn't want you to fix it. See, we are fixers more than listeners. And so you can see that these skills are going to help you in your own home as we start to listen more instead of just problem solve, get the problem fixed. Also, we're afraid of silence. We might ask a question, and then instead of listening, maybe it took him too long to answer. And so then we started talking. And there's an interesting principle here in coaching, and that is, the longer it takes a person to answer your question, the more powerful and important the question was. And because we are afraid of silence, we have cut off the most important opportunities that there were. We cut off the opportunities for them of what they would say because we were afraid of silence. You see, when you ask a simple, non-important question, I can answer that real quick. If I ask a question that is personal, that may be very important to them, they've got to think about it. Give it time, and don't be afraid of silence, or otherwise we will lose the most important opportunities that we have. Does that make sense? Now, it could be that if I ask a question and there's silence, and if I wait a while, I might say, what if I put it in another way? See, I'm still not giving up on that, but it may be it was my fault that I didn't ask it in the right way. There's also mental clutter. I've got so many things going on in my mind that I'm thinking about, oh, did I leave the oven on? Or different things like that. Or I'm thinking about my vacation. And I'm supposed to be thinking and listening to what they're saying, and my mental clutter is so much. And I believe that we need to pray for clarity of mind and say, God, there's lots of things on my mind right now. Can you take them away because this person's really important to me? Do you think you'll do it? I do. Let's look at the beauty of listening. And this is there's some neat stuff in it, and you have it down there, so I'm going to go through quickly. True listeners no longer have an inner need to make their presence known. They are free to receive, to welcome, to accept. Listening is much more than allowing another to talk while waiting for a chance to respond. See, because we want to give our point. And so we listen, anxiously wanting to tell them the answer or give them our idea or tell them our story. And I catch myself doing that sometimes, where I'm listening to someone, listening to their story. And I have my story. And I kind of want to tell them about that. You know, when you start telling your story, it's like yours isn't as important. I need to tell you mine. So we need to wait on our story. There may be a time when it's appropriate, but when we tell ours, it takes away from the need for theirs. Listening is paying full attention to others and welcoming them into our very being. We actually drove down to New Mexico. It was exciting to see these mountains and stuff we'd never seen before. You know, after you've been there for a while, pretty soon it's just like get there is all. But it's fun. Isn't it fun to go to new places and to go on new roads and to see things you've never seen before? Think about that with people. Isn't it fun to say, I get to meet some new people. I love to listen to their story. It's like traveling through a new place in the world and to be able to see something I've never seen before. And so we're learning from them, opening up our heart to explore new places, new things, new people. Listening is a form of spiritual hospitality by which you invite strangers to become friends, to get to know their inner selves more fully. That spiritual hospitality, I like that phrase. Doesn't that, I think you, especially as Christians who want to share, doesn't that resonate with you? That whole concept of accepting people in. Tell me more about that, instead of just telling ourselves. I always have to tell people this every time we have somebody over to our house. Almost every time. My wife always asks me at the end of when they leave, well, honey, what did you learn about them? You know? And there's probably a reason for that, because I like to talk. But I think that's so important, is say, what did you learn about them? And so she keeps me straight, and I appreciate that. Listen until you no longer exist. You see, it's always about us. But when we learn this listening skill, pretty soon, it's like, I'm just learning about them, just listening. So here's a couple listening skills I want you to learn. Listen genuinely. For instance, tell me what you think, not just information. What ideas have you had? Tell me more about that. Why is that issue important to you? See, you're really digging in deeper. Listening attentively. This was interesting and probably new for me as I read through this. And that is, you know when you talk to somebody on a cell phone and you don't hear anything back? You're just talking? What do you end up doing? Are you still there? Because I didn't get any cues. And even when we are talking in person, sometimes we get that same attitude. There's no response. And maybe they're listening, but I don't feel it. I don't hear it. And I almost want to ask, are you still there? I've preached in a black church before, and it's totally different because I'm constantly getting feedback. That's good. It makes me feel good. So we should do that as people talk to me and say, yeah. You know, not preach it, brother, or that type of thing, but at least we're going to be saying, go on, tell me some more. Wow, that's interesting. Be aware that those things are good to start adding to your listening skill. Yes, there you go. Okay. Listen openly with non-judgmental. Sometimes somebody that has come from a totally different background than us will be talking, and it's shocking sometimes what they might tell us. I need to step back and listen to what they're saying, rolling with things that might be shocking, and be non-judgmental. You start looking for the potential like Jesus did. And you start looking for where they could be, and you start admiring those potentials and those opportunities. That is very important. We listen actively so that if we're in person there, when we see they're excited, we don't just sit back and, we get excited with them. When they are emotional, we need to be responsive to their attitudes. That's looking interested engaging with their senses. Listening with curiosity, tell me more. And this is that part about what's over the next hill. I have that curiosity. And so as I'm listening to them, I'm learning a little bit, and I say, wow, I'd like to know more about that. You did what as you were growing up? So we're listening with curiosity, and we're kind of can't wait till we get over the next hill to see what else we can find out from them. Ask them, give me an example what that is. Reflectively, you might say, I'm hearing you say this. Am I correct to believe such and such? And so we're asking to clarify what they are saying. Now, many times when I start asking them, I may discover that I was wrong. Oh, here's what I'm hearing you say. And I quote it, and they say, no, that's not what I meant. And we might think, well, that was too bad that I misunderstood, but it was better for you to ask and be corrected than to not ask at all. And then later on, when we're talking, they say, man, I don't think you heard anything that I said. The fact I ask and am corrected is actually a valuable thing. Listen with intuitively, and that is to get a sense for, find out what they mean, not just what they say. This is an acronym WAIT, which means why am I talking? So when you're in this conversation, ask yourself, why am I talking right now? Is there a reason? These are some great Bible verses. Proverbs 17, a man of knowledge uses words with restraint. The other one, my dear brothers, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. Also, you've heard the thing, we've got 2 ears and only 1 mouth. Use them at least in that percentage. Here's some simple rules in coaching. This is probably a good time to bring those out. And one is to not give advice. And you say, well, how can I help a person that doesn't know everything I know? As I told you about our youth pastor, if you tell them things, it will not be half as powerful as if they discover it. Don't tell people something that they can discover on their own. I was sitting in a Sabbath school class. Interestingly enough, it was before I was going to be giving a coaching seminar. And I always like to talk in Sabbath school. I'm the guy who is always answering. I'm slowly learning how not to do that. I was going to say something in response. It was on the creation evolution time, I think, when they were covering that. And I waited just a little longer. And somebody across the room had exactly the same comment that I was going to make. And if I wait, I will discover that someone else has it too. And so as I'm coaching, if I wait a little longer or give a couple little things and they discover it, I have just moved their potential a huge jump from something I was going to share with them to something they discovered themselves, which was much more powerful. And then don't fix the problem for them. When you are always fixing the problem, they will become dependent on you. When they are discovering the solution, pretty soon they'll say, wait, I don't need to call him about that because I've been fixing these problems as well. And so they start to become more and more stronger in their own abilities and understand that. Now, if you are spending time with people and you know there's something that would really help them and they're not coming up with it, you always ask their permission to share something with them. I say, you know, while we've been talking, and I've been listening to what you're saying, something keeps coming to my mind that I think would really be helpful. Do you mind if I share that with you? You see what I've done? I haven't just dumped on them. And then after I share that, I might say, now, did that seem to fit your situation, or does that seem like something that might be helpful? What I did is I didn't tell them, this is absolute, you have to do this. I shared it with permission, and then asked them, does that seem like it might work? it still is their choice. It still has the power of something they've discovered, because I simply gave opportunities, they discovered it, it still was theirs. That is the way you would do that with other information. We're going to have an opportunity to practice some listening, but we're going to take a break first. And then I'm just going to give you a heads up. The other ones, again, are going to be asking questions, which ties in with listening. Because I ask a question, then listen. I ask a question, listen. So it ties in with listening, but because it's so important, I don't want to rush into it and miss this opportunity. So